We often have a need to present multiple images on a page. High resolution for print purposes, maybe lower resolution for presentation in our camera clubs and for other projects. The easiest and most creative way I've found to do this is via clipping in Photoshop's layers. It's where we create our layout with just shapes to begin with, then we drop the images into the shapes using Photoshop's layers. It is one of those things that does sound a lot more complicated when you explain it than it actually is. In camera clubs, this is most likely to come up with regard to the subject of triptychs, but even they don't have to be three uniform oblongs. I find that these shapes are easier to work with than images. Let's take a look first at placing images within these shapes, and later on we'll look at how quick and easy it is to create the artwork. Now, as you look over to the right hand side, the layers palette looks a little bit complicated, but it really isn't, because each of these layers just holds one aspect of the artwork you can see on screen. If I go to the top and select the oval, there you can see it turned on and off. So in the interest of keeping things simple, I'm going to go and find an image that's going to sit nicely in that oval in the center, and I'll open it up into Photoshop. So here I have a nice strong image which would sit nicely in that oval. I'm going to drag the tab from the top of the screen. With the Move tool selected, that's the top of the toolbox on the left, click drag and drop, and I can shut this image down. What I want to do with this is over on the right hand side, right at the top of the layered stack, because we need to drop the images just above the shape we want to apply them to. In this case, it's the oval. Holding the Alt key, as I bring my cursor between the two layers, you'll see the cursor changes, and if I click, the image is clipped to the shape below. Now, sometimes we're going to need to resize the image, and probably the best way to do this is with our free transform tool. We'll find that in the edit menu at the top left of the screen, but it's one of those tools we use quite often. Control T is the shortcut, and there you can see the bounding box around the outer edge. So I've got some scope here to be able to drag in the corner toggle. Now, I don't want to go too far and reveal any of the black, of course, but I can also click inside and move it into position. So I've got quite a bit of freedom here, and I can certainly move the image a little bit more to the right. And when I'm happy with that, I can hit done at the top, or I can hit the little arrow there, and there's the first of the images set in place. All I have to do for the remainder of these is to do exactly the same with the pictures of my choice. Now here I've opened up another image which is going to fit into those shapes pretty well, so let's repeat what we did. Click drag and drop the tab out onto the screen. With the Move tool, click drag and drop, and then I can close this down. Now, it would make sense for this image to be a part of one of those on the right because the animal is looking left. So I'd need to drag this down and position this just over the top of the shape that I want to clip it to. And once again, Alt, click on the line between the two, and there we have it. Control T once again, there's the bounding box. Click and drag, get the image to the size that I want it. I don't have to bring it down really small because I've got a little bit of scope here. Hit the tick or the enter key, and there we have it. Now, of course, we would save our project as we go along, saving this as a Photoshop file, so all of the layers are retained. Because if we get halfway through this and leave it and come back another day, we can quite easily change any of the images we've dropped into the shape by deleting them and importing another. But what we can also do is to add a little bit of style if we want to. Just for the moment, let me go down to my background here. Black is my foreground colour over in the toolbox on the left, so Alt Backspace will flood that with black. Just for a moment we can't see the other shapes, but bear with me. If I select my oval shape as an example, and I go down to the effects at the bottom of the page, I'm going to choose stroke. I'm going to, let's move this out of the way, I'm going to choose, I'll choose white, and on the inside of the line I'm going to put a size, let's try 6, maybe that's a little bit light, let's go to 8 and click OK. Now the good thing about these options is we can come back even in the future when we open this up, double click, and if we change our mind and decide we want actually a slightly thicker line, we can adjust it. It remains live all of the time. But if I want to transfer those settings to the other layers that I'm working on, I can do that too. If I hold the Alt key, I can click the effects, beg your pardon, let's do that again, click the effects and drag them down onto the other layer. And of course I could do that quickly and easily to every other layer in our artwork. We could also reverse this. We could have a white background and we could decide to have a black line around the edge of the shapes and even a drop shadow if we chose to do that. And here's what that looks like with just a few moments of work. Now, as I have said, this can be set up for high quality prints, or we can set it up at lower resolution. This is quite high resolution. You'll notice that when I dropped any of these images over the shapes, the image was already pretty close to the size of that shape, and these are all high resolution images. So just as an example, if I go to my image menu and image size, at 300 pixels per inch, I could get a pretty good print from this, 40 inches by 27. Incidentally, and completely off the subject, I did have a question from a viewer on where I locate my images for artwork like this. All of the images that I use in all of my videos and demos are my own images, shot by myself and edited by myself. I never use anyone else's images at all. So once we've got this far, the layers does look a little bit complicated, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. Remember, you can tuck away some of these effects just by clicking the little up arrow here. So if you feel there's a need to do that, you can tidy things up a little bit. You would naturally save this as a Photoshop file so you can come back to it and make changes tomorrow, just in case you felt there was a need. But at some stage, of course, we would go to the top right of the layers perhaps and choose to flatten the image ready for printing. Now, I always store the shapes that I create so I can use them again in the future, and that makes sense, obviously. Now, we're going to look at creating these shapes in the next video, but just to bring this one to a close, you'll notice there's a slight difference here. If you look over to the layers palette, we would expect to see 4 layers, 1 for the white background and 3 for the shapes, but you can see it's a flattened image. But we can still use a similar process without going to any problems of bringing this back to its layered form. But first, let's go to image and image size, because let's just assume this time I'm doing this for a camera club project or something where I need something like the HD size. So I'm going to go to 1920 1080. Control 0 will open that up on screen. But what I need to do now is to locate an image that's going to be sitting in one of these oblong shapes. So here I have an image that's going to fit into one of those shapes. I'm going to hit Control A, which is the universal keyboard shortcut to select all, and you can see the selection around the outer edge, and then Control C to copy that to my clipboard. Now I go back to my triptych here, and what I'm going to do is to just select the center of these shapes. To do that, I'm going to pick up my magic wand tool and just click into that shape. Once we've got that, then we need to go to Edit. I'm looking for Paste Special, somewhere in there. There it is, Paste Special, and Paste Into. Now you can see the image drops into place much as it did before, but of course it's massively too big. Let me pick up my Move tool, and I can move it a bit so you can see just how big. Control T will bring up the bounding box, but because we're working in low resolution, we can't see it. Control 0 will fit that bounding box on screen and give me a chance to get it in a more sensible size. And of course we don't want to work like this for very long, so Control 0 again. That'll bring it back up. Now I can fine tune it, and hopefully I can just about get the whole of the animal into that shape, and when I do, there we have exactly the same as we had before. And here we've used a slightly different way of working the Paste Into effect. Now as you can see, I've gone ahead and pasted into the birds on the extreme right and left, but the bird on the left is facing the wrong way. I'd like him or her to be facing inwards. Well, that's pretty easy. Just make sure you select the correct layer, go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and it may mean that we've got to do a little bit of movement, but there you can see I now have my birds nicely positioned. Now if we'd like to put a stroked line around the outer edge of these images, slight difference here. Instead of selecting the shapes, we select the image, the effects, and stroke. Now the stroke here is quite large. Remember, the reason for that is we're working on low resolution images, so let's drop that down to about 3, so we've got a nice delicate black line. But once again, if I just drag this out a little bit, you can see the effects. Alt, click and drag, Alt, click and drag. Let's close that down again so you can see the image in its entirety. I'll see you in the next video when we're going to create these shapes, and it really is quick and easy copy and paste mostly. Bye for now.